At the rehearsal dinner, my fiancée said, "You deserve the truth." I thought she meant something small. Then she whispered, "Yesterday I slept with my ex to understand my feelings. But it's you I love." The night was supposed to be perfect. I had spent months making sure every small detail of the rehearsal dinner went right. The string lights, the white tablecloths, even the playlist softly looping in the background. The air smelled of grilled salmon and wine, mixed with laughter that carried through the courtyard of the restaurant. Everyone was there, her parents, mine, our friends from college. The two families meeting, bonding, joking about how, finally, the wedding was happening. Amber looked radiant. I remember noticing how she seemed to glow under the dim amber lights, her hair done just enough to look effortless. But something about her eyes felt off. They didn't land anywhere for long. When she smiled, it was almost too wide, like she was trying to convince herself of something. During the speeches, her father went first, some standard, heartfelt dad talk. Then my brother cracked a few jokes. Everything was perfect until Amber stood up with her glass raised and said she wanted to say something too. I assumed she was just nervous, maybe planning to thank everyone or embarrass me with some funny story. Instead, she started with, "Nathan deserves the truth." The room went still for half a second before laughter broke out again. Everyone assumed it was part of a joke. I smiled weakly, waiting for her to continue. But then her hand trembled slightly. I noticed her knuckles whitening as she gripped the stem of the glass. She turned her head toward me and whispered, low enough that only I could hear, "Yesterday, I slept with Trent. I just needed to understand how I felt. But it's you I love." I felt my heartbeat shift, like a wire snapping inside my chest. For a moment, all I heard was the echo of forks clinking and people laughing, still unaware of what had just been said. My mind didn't process it all at once. It was like my body shut down, and everything slowed, her lips still moving, her hand on my arm, eyes searching for forgiveness in real time. But I didn't flinch. I smiled, nodded, raised my glass, and kissed her forehead like nothing had happened. The people around us clapped, assuming it was just some emotional couple moment. My brother shouted something about how these two are disgustingly cute. And that was it. The night continued as if she hadn't just ripped something out of me. When dinner ended, she came to hug me from behind as we walked to the parking lot. Her breath smelled like the cheap wine she'd been drinking too fast. "Can we talk?" she whispered. I turned. My voice came out calm, almost detached. "Sure." Behind the restaurant, near the dumpsters, she started explaining, no, justifying, that she had run into Trent accidentally 2 weeks ago, that she needed closure, that she wanted to be sure before marrying me. Each sentence made less sense than the one before it. The way she spoke sounded rehearsed, like she had been building this script in her head, preparing for the damage she knew was coming. I asked her one thing. Was it just once? She hesitated. That pause told me everything I needed to know. I nodded, said nothing else, and walked away. Her voice cracked behind me, calling my name, saying she messed up, that she didn't mean to. But I didn't stop. The night was cold, and the air burned my throat. When I reached the car, I sat there for several minutes, gripping the steering wheel, trying to make sense of the reality I had just stepped into. The world outside looked blurry through the windshield. The restaurant lights reflected like distant stars. I drove aimlessly, ending up near the edge of downtown where Trent lived. I knew his building, a 3-story red brick complex with an auto shop below. He had been her high school boyfriend, the kind of guy who peaked at 19 and never recovered. I parked across the street. His window was lit. Then, like some cruel confirmation, Amber's car pulled up 10 minutes later. She got out quickly, checked her phone, and disappeared inside. I sat there for half an hour, just watching that window glow faintly against the dark. My mind wasn't racing. It was strangely clear. The rage I expected never came. It was replaced by something sharper, something patient. When the lights in the window went out, I drove home. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen with the lights off, staring at the empty coffee cup in front of me. I thought about every conversation we'd ever had, every time she had asked for understanding, every time she said she hated lies, every time she claimed I was too logical. Maybe she was right. Maybe logic was my curse. Because now, all I could think about were the logistics of her betrayal. When she found the time, where, how long she'd been lying. By sunrise, the shock had solidified into something colder. I didn't text her, didn't answer her calls. I went for a run instead, passing through streets still quiet from the night before. Somewhere between the steady rhythm of my breathing and the slap of sneakers on pavement, I made a decision. I wouldn't shout, break things, or make a scene. That's what she expected. She needed chaos to feel in control again. I wasn't going to give her that. The next day, she showed up at my place. Her hair was a mess, makeup smeared, eyes red from crying. She started with the same script. She didn't mean to. She was confused, It was a mistake. I listened. Every word sounded emptier than the last. When she said she wanted to make it right, I simply asked, "Did you sleep at his place last night too?" Her silence was the answer. She collapsed onto the floor, crying, saying she'd end it, that she wanted to fix everything before the wedding. She promised to cut all contact, to prove she still loved me. I remember walking to the window, watching cars go by outside. It was strange. I wasn't angry. I just felt detached, like watching someone else's life play out. I told her she could leave her key on the table. She begged me to listen. I told her I already had. When she finally left, I stood in the quiet apartment surrounded by the remnants of the life we had planned together. Invitation cards on the counter, a half-packed suitcase for the honeymoon, the ring box still on my dresser. I opened it, stared at the diamond, and felt nothing. But later that night, something inside me clicked. I realized I didn't want to just walk away. I wanted her to understand what she had destroyed, not through yelling, but through the slow dismantling of the world she thought she controlled. So I started paying attention to every detail she had overlooked. Her bank app still logged into my tablet. Her email auto-filled on my laptop. The shared cloud folder where she stored wedding photos. And hidden there, old screenshots of messages with Trent. That's when I found the real timeline. The affair hadn't started yesterday. It had been going on for months, while she was visiting her mother, while I was closing a deal in Chicago, even while we were ring shopping. She hadn't slipped once. She had lived a double life with careful precision. I sat there in the dark, reading their messages, feeling something heavy settle inside my chest. Each line wasn't just betrayal, it was planning. She told him things about me, things meant to humiliate. She said I was predictable, safe, the kind of man women settle for when they're tired of passion. She joked that marrying me was her practical choice. And yet, she was planning to go through with it, smiling for photos, wearing white, holding my hand in front of hundreds of people. That was when the idea came. Not a single moment of revenge, but a process. A quiet, methodical reversal. I wouldn't destroy her publicly. I'd let her destroy herself, piece by piece, until the only thing left was silence. The next morning, I texted her. "Let's talk. Come by tonight." She responded instantly, hopeful, relieved. Said she'd bring dinner, that she'd do anything to make it right. When she showed up that evening, she hugged me so tightly it almost made me forget what I knew. Almost. We ate, talked about starting over. She cried again, promised she'd be better, promised she loved me. I nodded, pretended to believe it. And as she sat there smiling through her tears, I quietly made a mental list of every piece of leverage I had, every shared account, every expense I'd paid, every document with her signature. By the time she left that night, I had already decided what needed to happen. She thought forgiveness meant I still loved her. In reality, it meant I needed her to relax long enough for me to take everything back. And I would. The following weeks felt like walking through a movie I'd already seen, but this time I knew the ending. Amber was desperate to act like things were normal again, clinging to routines as if repetition could erase the truth. She texted good morning every day, left coffee at my door, sent long messages about how we're stronger now. I responded just enough to keep her calm. I kept my tone steady, neutral, forgiving. That's what made it work. The more patient I was, the more she believed she had fixed it. And the more she relaxed, the easier it was to rebuild the image she wanted to believe in. 2 weeks later, she invited me to brunch with her parents. They were cheerful, relieved that we had worked through it. Amber played the perfect fiancé again, touching my arm, laughing too loud, acting proud of our resilience. I just smiled and nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. I had spent those 2 weeks digging, not out of curiosity, but strategy. I combed through the shared financial folder I had created for our wedding planning. It had her signatures, bank info, credit approvals, even her job documents. She'd been careless, letting me handle everything because she trusted me with money. That folder became my weapon. At night, I'd sit at my computer tracing the web of her financial life. Joint cards, her student loan, her car payments. I found a pattern. Everything she owned was tied to something I'd either co-signed or set up. She thought she was independent, but she had built her stability inside my framework. The irony was beautiful. One afternoon, I went to see Trent. I didn't tell Amber. He worked at his family's auto shop, the kind of place with rusted tools, oil-stained walls, and a radio permanently tuned to classic rock. He looked surprised but smug when he saw me. Thought I came to fight or demand answers. Instead, I told him I just wanted to clear the air. He laughed, said, "Man, she told me you were uptight, but didn't think you'd actually show up." I kept my face blank. He went on talking, too much. Said Amber had been emotionally done long before she cheated. Said she'd told him she was marrying me because I was financially stable. He smirked when he said it. I let him. I wanted him to. Every word he said confirmed that Amber had rewritten our entire relationship in her head. Before I left, I said something quiet that made him blink. "You should have stayed in your lane, Trent." He laughed again, but his eyes flickered with something uneasy. I went straight to the florist afterward, not to cancel the wedding, but to transfer everything under my personal name. Every deposit, every invoice, every vendor. I told them the event was being rescheduled, that payments should now come through me directly. It was easy because she had authorized me earlier. At home, Amber called, asking where I was. I told her I was running errands for us. She sounded touched, grateful. That made it almost too easy. 3 nights later, she came over with dinner and a bottle of wine. She wanted to start over officially. I poured the drinks, let her talk. She said she wanted to move in together before the wedding to rebuild intimacy. I agreed. I even suggested we get a bigger apartment, one near downtown. She loved the idea. A week later, we found one. She signed the lease under her name because my credit score was better used for the mortgage later. I told her I'd help with the deposit. I transferred the money from our joint account, the one she thought was ours. But the account balance she saw was a duplicate. I had already moved the real funds elsewhere. As we unpacked boxes, she played music and danced barefoot in the living room. For a brief second, I wondered if I'd ever really known her at all, or if she'd just been playing a role the entire time. The kind of person who learned early that affection could be currency. I pushed the thought away. The time for introspection was over. 2 weeks after moving in, she quit her job, said she wanted to focus on wedding planning. I encouraged it, told her I'd take care of things. She had no idea she'd just cut off her only lifeline. I started the slow withdrawal process then, not financial, emotional. I stopped answering her texts as quickly, canceled a few date nights, started coming home late claiming work emergencies. She asked if something was wrong. I told her no. I wanted her to wonder. Around that time, Lacey, her maid of honor, called me. She sounded nervous, but honest. She said she'd been keeping something from me, that Amber had been seeing Trent months before the dinner, that she'd covered for her once, saying Amber was at a spa weekend when she was actually out of town with him. Lacey said she couldn't live with the guilt anymore. I thanked her and didn't tell her I already knew. But that call did something. Lacey's tone wasn't like the others. There was anger under it. Not pity, not sympathy, but disgust. I could tell she had her own history with Amber's manipulation. Over the next few days, Lacey and I talked more. She started sharing things Amber had said about me behind my back, that I was safe, boring, someone who'd never leave. Each new revelation made me calmer. The anger had long evaporated. Now it was precision. Amber began noticing the shift. She said I seemed different, colder. I told her stress from work. She started getting paranoid, checking my phone when I left it on the counter, tracking my location on shared apps. I let her see what I wanted her to see. I drive to places I knew would confuse her, quiet cafes, parks, random neighborhoods. Let her wonder if I was meeting someone. Each time she confronted me, I'd just say, "You said you wanted the truth once. Are you sure you can handle it?" That line made her flinch every time. She started losing sleep, pacing, checking my messages at night, her control slipping. I watched her unravel piece by piece, and the best part was she still thought I loved her enough to stay. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I had set everything up. The deposits, the payments, the lease, all in her name, all under her financial liability. And when I was done, I planned the final turn quietly. One night, she came to me with tears in her eyes, saying she had a bad feeling and asking if I still loved her. I told her yes, because technically, in that moment, I loved the idea of her downfall. That same night, she tried to reach Trent again. I know because I saw the call logs later. He didn't answer. The next morning, I got a message from an unknown number. It was his fiancée, Hannah. She'd found out everything. Said she had evidence of the affair, screenshots, voicemails. She wanted to know if I planned to expose Amber. I told her no. That wasn't my goal. I wanted something quieter, more permanent. By the end of that week, Amber's job reached out to her. Someone had sent them messages from her work email, explicit ones between her and Trent from months ago. HR said it violated company policy, so she was blacklisted from rehiring. I didn't send those emails myself, but I did make sure they were found. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same digital carelessness that built her illusion was now taking it apart. When she got the email from HR, she screamed at me for an hour, accusing me of leaking it. I didn't deny or confirm anything. I just said, "You're the one who wanted honesty. The universe has a way of giving it back." She broke down again. But this time, I didn't comfort her. I went to bed. By the next morning, she was silent. The house felt heavier. I could tell she was starting to feel it, the quiet shift, the balance turning. She didn't know how deep it went yet, but she would soon. Amber started waking up earlier than usual, pacing through the apartment, phone glued to her hand. The confidence she'd once carried had completely vanished. She wasn't dressing up anymore, wasn't posting her couple photos, barely left the house except to grocery shop or check the mailbox. Every time I saw her glance at me, there was a flicker of fear, a suspicion that something was wrong, but she couldn't define what. I made sure she couldn't. We still talked about the wedding occasionally, at least when she brought it up. I pretended to still be planning, nodding when she suggested flower colors or catering choices. But all of those vendors were already under my control. The florist, the bakery, the event planner, every one of them had quietly canceled or rerouted the deposits weeks ago. The accounts she thought were paid were now just hollow promises. Amber didn't realize that every email confirmation she saw was a draft I'd written and scheduled from her own account to keep her comfortable. She lived inside the illusion I built, and I wanted her to. The funny thing about guilt is that it feeds on itself when no one confronts it. If you scream at someone, they fight back. If you stay silent, they collapse under the weight of their own mind. I gave her silence, consistency, and calmness, the worst punishment for someone who feeds on attention. A few weeks later, she finally broke the quiet. One night, she waited for me to come home from work. I'd been out meeting with a financial advisor, not for her, but to move the last of the shared funds completely out of reach. When I walked through the door, she was standing by the window, phone in hand, shaking. She said she saw a notification that someone had changed the access to our joint savings account. I told her it was just the bank updating settings. She didn't believe me. Her voice rose. She said she knew I was hiding something. She demanded the truth. That word, truth, had become almost comical by then. I looked at her and said quietly, "You remember what you told me at the rehearsal dinner?" Her face went pale. "You said you slept with Trent to understand your feelings. I think now it's my turn to understand mine." She didn't understand what I meant, not fully. But the way she backed away told me she felt something in the air shift. I didn't have to raise my voice. The silence that followed was enough to crush her. The next morning, she woke up to find her credit card declined. Her checking account was frozen for security verification. Her car payment bounced. She called the bank in tears while I sat in the kitchen sipping coffee, pretending to scroll through emails. By noon, she was trembling. She thought it was a mistake, that maybe the bank had mixed something up. She said she'd go there herself to fix it. I offered to drive her. When we got there, the clerk told her politely that her accounts were temporarily restricted due to recent suspicious transfers. Transfers she herself had authorized, on paper. Her signature, her ID, her consent. She didn't know that I had guided her through all of it weeks ago, under the pretense of financial consolidation for wedding planning. On the ride back, she didn't speak. That evening, I went to take a shower. When I came out, her phone was open on the couch, a string of unsent messages to Trent staring back at me. She had typed, "Please, I need help. He's doing something to me. I can't access anything." She never sent it, maybe out of fear or pride. I locked the phone and placed it beside her. She didn't even look up. That weekend, I started disappearing again, coming home late, leaving early, answering vaguely when she asked where I went. Sometimes I'd say work, sometimes I'd just shrug. She began spiraling, convinced I was cheating. I didn't deny it. I didn't confirm it. The following Tuesday, she found a hotel receipt in my jacket pocket, one I had planted intentionally. It wasn't from a hotel at all, but from a business conference center I'd rented for meetings. The look on her face when she saw it was exactly what I wanted. Devastation mixed with confusion. She confronted me that night, shaking, shouting that I was cruel, that I was just like her. I let her rage until she exhausted herself, then said, "No, I'm not like you. I don't lie to feel alive. I just tell people what they need to hear." Her knees gave out. She sat on the floor, sobbing into her hands, saying she didn't mean to ruin us. I left the room. Over the next few days, I let the silence grow until it filled every corner of that apartment. The only sound at night was the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the walls. She couldn't take it anymore. She started trying to fix things, cooking breakfast, writing apology notes, suggesting therapy. But every gesture felt mechanical, desperate. She wasn't doing it because she cared. She was doing it because she was terrified of losing her comfort. That's when I decided it was time. On a rainy Thursday morning, I packed a small bag, took the keys, and left. I didn't say a word. I turned off my phone halfway down the highway and kept driving. No destination, just distance. I stopped at a diner 2 hours away, had breakfast, and checked my email. The notifications were already pouring in. Amber had called me 17 times, texted 34. By afternoon, I went back online. Her messages had changed tone completely. The first few were angry, then pleading, then panicked. When I finally returned home that night, she was sitting on the couch in the dark, clutching her phone. She looked smaller somehow, like the walls had swallowed her confidence whole. She whispered that she couldn't take it anymore. She said she'd do anything, Just please stop whatever I was doing to her life. I sat down across from her and said calmly, I'm not doing anything. You're just watching everything you built crumble. I'm just making sure you see it happen. She started crying again, asking what I wanted. I told her I didn't want anything. Not her, not revenge, not closure. Just balance. The next day, the power went out. Not for the whole building, just our unit. I'd called the utility company the week before and transferred the account back to her name only. She hadn't paid the last bill. That night, she slept on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, phone flashlight flickering across the walls. I watched her from the doorway, not with satisfaction, but with the strange emptiness of someone who'd finally run out of anger. The next morning, I left for work and didn't come back. When she tried to call me, the number was disconnected. When she went to the leasing office, they told her the rent was due in full under her name, and the deposit had already been refunded to the account she no longer had access to. I didn't take her money. I just took away everything she used me for. By the end of the week, she'd moved out, or rather, been forced to. I found out later she stayed with her mother, but even that didn't last. Her family knew something was off when she showed up with no job, no savings, and a trail of unpaid bills behind her. They didn't know the details, but they knew enough. I didn't speak to her again for 3 months. During that time, I rebuilt everything she tried to take from me, quietly, efficiently, without her shadow attached. When she finally reached out again, it was through an unknown number. The message was short. I don't understand how you could do this. I told you the truth. I read it once, then deleted it. Truth had never been her problem. Consequence was. It's strange how quickly peace settles in once you stop pretending to save someone who doesn't want saving. The silence that used to feel heavy now felt clean. I woke up early again, went for runs, answered calls from clients, cooked breakfast without feeling like I had to listen for footsteps in the hallway. There was no more perfume lingering in the apartment, no constant hum of explanations waiting to happen. Just quiet, deliberate, absolute quiet. I didn't block Amber's number, though. I wanted her messages to come through. They started as long apologies. Pages of text about therapy, forgiveness, second chances. Then they turned bitter. She accused me of emotional abuse, of ruining her stability. I didn't reply. Eventually, her messages turned to silence too. That was when I knew she'd finally begun living in the reality she built. 2 months passed. I moved to a smaller apartment on the other side of the city, closer to work, minimal furniture, no reminders of her. One evening after a meeting, I stopped by a small cafe. The place was quiet except for an old jazz record playing softly in the background. That's when I saw Lacey. She was sitting by the window, typing on her laptop. When she noticed me, her eyes widened. We hadn't spoken since the fallout. I walked over, and she stood, smiling, an honest, cautious smile. She said she'd heard rumors about the breakup, but didn't know the details. I told her just enough, that the engagement ended before the wedding, that I was doing fine. She nodded, said she wasn't surprised. Then she told me something I hadn't expected. After Amber's meltdown, she tried to help her, offered her a place to stay. But Amber turned it into a war. Blamed Lacey for poisoning our relationship. Claimed she'd seduced me behind her back. Lacey laughed bitterly when she told me that, but I could tell it still stung. Amber's last weapon had always been accusation. We talked for hours. For the first time in months, I wasn't guarded. Lacey had a calmness about her, direct, unpretentious. When I dropped her off that night, she said softly, "I'm glad you got away before she destroyed you." I remember thinking how different that sounded from sympathy. It wasn't pity, it was understanding. The next day, I got an email from my old landlord. He said someone had come by asking for my new address, a woman with blonde hair, who claimed we still had shared property. I didn't have to guess who. I called the building office where Amber had lived, and they said she'd left weeks ago, owing 3 months' rent and skipping the last payment. That same evening, a message came in from an unknown number. It was a photo of Amber standing behind the reception counter of a small day spa. The caption read, "She's working here now." The sender was Lacey. She'd run into her by chance. I looked at the photo for a long time. Amber's hair was shorter, darker, her face thinner. There was no fire left in her expression, just fatigue. It didn't give me joy. If anything, it confirmed what I already knew, that her collapse wasn't revenge. It was consequence. A few weeks later, I had to drop off paperwork for a client near that same spa. Curiosity won. I parked across the street and watched through the glass door. Amber was behind the counter, talking to a customer, smiling mechanically. Her uniform was neat, her movements precise, rehearsed. She looked smaller somehow, like the world had finally caught up to her. When she noticed me through the glass, she froze. For a brief second, her face went pale. Then she looked away quickly, pretending to sort papers on the desk. I didn't go inside. I just watched her for a moment longer, then turned and walked away. That night, I received an email from her, Short, formal, desperate. Nathan, I saw you today. Please, can we talk? I've changed. I know what I did. You don't have to forgive me, but I need to explain. I deleted it. Not out of spite, but because there was nothing left to explain. Amber's greatest punishment wasn't losing me, or her job, or her money. It was having to live in the world she created, one where trust had an expiration date, and every connection came with a hidden cost. Months passed, and life settled into something almost peaceful. I stopped checking old accounts, stopped replaying memories, stopped expecting closure. One evening, while sorting through paperwork, I found the wedding ring, still tucked in its velvet box. I took it to a pawn shop and sold it for a fraction of what it was worth. On the walk home, I didn't feel loss, only relief. Lacey and I kept crossing paths. Lunch turned into dinner, then into quiet weekends together. There was no grand romance, no sweeping declarations, just steady companionship, built on something both of us had been missing, honesty without performance. One evening, we sat on her porch, watching the city lights flicker below. She asked me if I'd ever really forgiven Amber. I thought for a long time before answering. I don't think forgiveness is the right word, I said. You forgive people who make mistakes. What she did wasn't a mistake. It was a calculation. Lacey nodded. Then maybe forgiving isn't the point. Maybe it's just learning not to care anymore. She was right. A year after the rehearsal dinner that ended everything, I got another message from a mutual friend who still followed Amber on social media. It was a photo of a beach at sunset. No caption, just her name tagged in it. I didn't even open the post. That night, I slept better than I had in years. A few weeks later, I ran into Trent at a networking event of all places. He'd lost his auto shop. His fiancée, Hannah, had left him, taken their house in the split. He looked older, defeated, tried to act casual. He said, "Guess life caught up to both of us, huh?" I looked at him, calm and steady. "No," I said. "Just you." Then I walked away. After that, I stopped thinking about both of them entirely. Some people say revenge is about making someone hurt as much as you did. But it isn't. It's about making them remember. And Amber would never forget, not because I destroyed her, but because I let her destroy herself while she thought I was saving her. Lacey and I eventually moved in together. It wasn't romantic at first, just two people who understood brokenness from different angles. But over time, something real formed. Something quiet, unforced. Sometimes she'd joke, "Guess your revenge worked better than therapy." I'd smile, but the truth was, it wasn't revenge that healed me. It was watching someone like Amber fade into irrelevance while my life became steady again. The last time I saw her was by accident. A grocery store aisle, almost 2 years later. She was standing near the self-checkout, holding a basket of cheap essentials. Instant noodles, canned soup, a single bottle of wine. She looked up and saw me. Her mouth parted slightly like she might say something, but she didn't. I nodded once, polite, distant. Then I turned and walked out before she could speak. There was no satisfaction in that moment. Just closure, clean and final. That night, as I sat on the balcony with Lacey, I realized something. Amber had once said she needed to understand her feelings. She had, and she learned that understanding doesn't always come with forgiveness. Sometimes it comes with silence, with absence, with the sound of a door closing behind you and never opening again. The world didn't need to see her punished. She punished herself every day she woke up to the life she'd chosen, stripped of the illusions she once built her ego on. I didn't need to ruin her. I just needed to leave her with herself.